They say you never really know someone until money comes between you. In my case, it took $47,000 and a cancer diagnosis to reveal who my sister truly was. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. I'm Rachel Morrison, 34, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had my life perfectly planned out. I had a promising career as a pediatric nurse, a small but cozy apartment in Boston, and most importantly, a close relationship with my older sister Emma. At least that's what I thought we had. Growing up, Emma was always the practical one. While I spent my money on textbooks and nursing school tuition, she invested in designer clothes and social connections. "You're too focused on others, Rach," she'd say, rolling her eyes at my career choice. "You need to think about yourself sometimes." The irony of those words still makes me laugh, though not in a happy way. Our parents died in a car accident when I was 19 and Emma was 22. They left us a modest inheritance, which our grandfather's financial advisor suggested we keep in a joint account until we were more established. Emma, already working in marketing, agreed immediately. I was too deep in grief and overwhelmed with nursing school to argue. "We'll look out for each other," Emma promised, hugging me at the lawyer's office. That's what sisters do. For 15 years, that seemed to be true. We added to the account regularly, building our safety net. I contributed more since Emma had a taste for expensive things, but I didn't mind. She was my sister, my only family. If she needed a designer bag or a luxury vacation to be happy, who was I to judge? The headaches started last spring. At first, I blamed them on long shifts at the children's hospital. But when the dizziness and nausea kicked in, my colleague Maria insisted I get checked out. "You're a nurse, Rachel," she said, blocking my path to the pediatric ward. "You know these aren't normal headaches." The MRI results came on a rainy Tuesday morning. Dr. Chen, a neurologist I'd worked with countless times, sat across from me with an expression I knew too well. I'd seen it on my own face when delivering difficult news to parents. "It's a tumor," he said gently, "located in the right temporal lobe. The good news is we caught it early and it's operable." I nodded mechanically, my nurse's training kicking in as he explained the treatment plan. Surgery, followed by radiation therapy, minimum 6 months recovery time. The estimated cost made my stomach clench, but I had the joint account. 15 years of savings meant exactly for emergencies like this. Emma was in the middle of wedding planning when I called to tell her. She'd gotten engaged to Richard, a venture capitalist she'd met at a charity gala. The wedding was set for the fall, and she talked about nothing else for months. "Oh my God, Rach, that's awful," she gasped when I told her about the tumor. "But you'll be okay for the wedding, right? I mean, you're still going to be my maid of honor." I should have seen it then, how her first concern was about her wedding, not my health. But I made excuses for her, like I always did. She was stressed about the wedding. She didn't deal well with medical stuff. She needed time to process. "The surgery's scheduled for next month," I explained. "I'll need to take a leave from work, so I'm going to need to use some money from our joint account for the medical bills." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "How much?" "Around 40,000. Insurance will cover most of it, but with the deductible and recovery time." That's a lot, Rach." Her voice had an odd tone. "Can't you wait a bit? Just until after the wedding? We've got all the deposits due, and you know how expensive everything is these days." "Emma, this is cancer. I can't exactly ask it to wait." Of course, she backpedaled quickly. "We'll figure something out. Listen, I've got to run, meeting with the florist. But we'll talk soon, okay? Love you." I tried not to worry as the days passed without hearing from her. Emma had always been flaky about returning calls, and she was busy with wedding preparations. Besides, I had enough on my plate coordinating with the hospital and arranging medical leave. Then came the morning I tried to access our joint account to pay the hospital's initial deposit. My card was declined. Thinking it was a mistake, I checked the balance online. The account was empty. Every penny of our 15 years of savings, gone. Transferred out 2 days after I told Emma about the tumor. My hands shook as I called her number, straight to voicemail. I tried texting, emailing, even messaging her on social media. Nothing. Finally, after 3 days of silence, she sent a text. "Had to move fast to lock in wedding vendors. You know how competitive the fall season is. Don't worry, I'll pay you back after the honeymoon. Love you." I stared at the message until the words blurred. $47,000, my cancer treatment money, spent on flowers, catering, and whatever else she deemed essential for her perfect day. Maria found me in the hospital chapel, trying to hold back tears as I researched medical loans. "Tell me what's wrong," she demanded, sitting beside me. "And don't say nothing because I know that look." So I told her everything. About Emma, the empty account, the unanswered calls. With each word, Maria's expression grew darker. "That's theft," she said flatly. "You need to go to the police." But I couldn't. Despite everything, Emma was my only family. The thought of her in legal trouble made me physically ill. Or maybe that was the tumor. "I'll figure something out," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Maybe I can delay the surgery, work some extra shifts." Maria's face softened. "Rachel, honey, you don't have time for that. This tumor isn't going to wait for your sister to finish her wedding season." That's when she told me about her uncle Vincent Martinez. He's a lawyer who specializes in estate planning and family disputes. "At least talk to him, please." To appease her, I agreed to meet with Mr. Martinez. His office was modest but welcoming, with none of the intimidating leather and mahogany I expected from a lawyer. He listened without interrupting as I explained my situation, his expression giving nothing away. When I finished, he sat back and asked a surprising question. "Tell me about your grandfather, Rachel." "Franklin Morrison." I blinked, thrown by the shift in topic. "Grandpa Frank, he died when I was 12. I remember he was kind, always had candy in his pockets for us. He's the one who set up our inheritance in the joint account." Mr. Martinez nodded, making a note. "And did you ever wonder why he chose that particular arrangement?" "I assumed it was to help us stay close after losing our parents. Emma always said." "What Emma said," he interrupted gently, "and what your grandfather intended, might be very different things." He pulled out a thick folder, yellowed with age. "You see, I was your grandfather's lawyer, and there's something you need to know about that joint account." He opened the folder, revealing documents covered in my grandfather's familiar handwriting. "Your grandfather was a wise man, Rachel. He knew money could either strengthen family bonds or destroy them. So he set up what he called a trust test, though neither you nor Emma knew about it at the time." My head spun, and not just from the tumor. "A test?" "The joint account was phase 1, Mr. Martinez explained. How you and Emma handled that shared responsibility would determine the distribution of the real inheritance." "Real inheritance?" My voice came out as a whisper. "What real inheritance?" Mr. Martinez smiled, sliding a document across his desk. "Your grandfather's actual estate, currently valued at just over $2 million. Part 2. The words $2 million echoed in my head as I stared at the document. My grandfather, kind, candy-carrying Grandpa Frank, had been secretly testing us all along. The joint account was never about the money itself, Mr. Martinez continued, his voice gentle. It was about character. Your grandfather believed that how people handle smaller responsibilities reveals their true nature. He pulled out more papers, decades of account statements, transaction records, contribution histories. For 15 years, we've been monitoring the account. Every deposit, every withdrawal, every interaction between you and Emma. My mind raced back through those years, all the times I deposited my extra nursing shift money while Emma bought designer clothes. The vacations she'd taken while I covered our shared expenses. The endless loans she'd never quite repaid. Your grandfather was particularly interested in how you'd handle a major crisis, Mr. Martinez added. He believed that adversity doesn't create character, it reveals it. A bitter laugh escaped me. Well, I guess Emma failed that test spectacularly. The test isn't over yet. Mr. Martinez checked his watch. In fact, the final phase begins in about 2 hours. At your sister's wedding reception. I'd almost forgotten about the wedding. Even after everything, Emma had kept sending demanding texts about my maid of honor duties. I've been ignoring them, too focused on figuring out how to pay for my surgery. What happens at the reception? The reading of your grandfather's letter. As his lawyer, I'm required to deliver it personally at a family gathering of your choosing. Your sister's wedding reception seems appropriate. There was a glint in his eye that suggested this timing wasn't entirely coincidental. But I'm not even going to the wedding anymore, I protested. After what Emma did. Oh, I think you'll want to be there for this. He handed me an envelope. Your grandfather left specific instructions about today, including this. Inside was a check for $50,000, dated for today, more than enough to cover my medical expenses. For your surgery, Mr. Martinez explained. Your grandfather set it aside years ago, along with a note that said just in case one of them needs it when the test comes. Tears blurred my vision. Even from beyond the grave, Grandpa Frank was looking out for us. 2 hours later, I walked into the crystal ballroom of the Four Seasons Hotel, where Emma's reception was in full swing. I changed into the maid of honor dress she'd chosen, a hideously expensive pink monstrosity that had cost 2 weeks' salary. Now I understood why she'd insisted I buy it myself instead of covering it with our money. Emma spotted me from across the room, her face switching from surprise to anxiety in an instant. She hurried over, perfect smile firmly in place. Rachel, I was so worried when you didn't come to the ceremony. But you're here now, and that's all that matters. She lowered her voice. Listen, about the money, I can explain everything. Save it. I cut her off, spotting Mr. Martinez entering the ballroom. There's someone here you need to talk to. Emma's face paled as she recognized him. Why is Grandpa's lawyer here? Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Martinez's voice carried across the room as he stepped up to the microphone. I apologize for interrupting the festivities, but I'm here to execute a long-standing legal obligation. Would Emma and Rachel Morrison please join me? The crowd parted as we made our way forward. I could see Richard, Emma's new husband, watching with confusion. He probably didn't even know about the stolen money yet. 15 years ago, Mr. Martinez began. Franklin Morrison set up a test for his granddaughters. A test of character, of responsibility, of family loyalty. Today that test concludes. He opened a sealed envelope and began to read, My dearest Emma and Rachel. If you're hearing this, then the moment of crisis I anticipated has finally arrived. The joint account I left you wasn't just a savings account. It was a window into your characters, a test of how you treat each other when money was involved. Rachel, my practical nurse, you've contributed steadily over the years, always thinking of others before yourself. Even when Emma's contributions were less consistent, you never complained, never held it against her. Emma, my social butterfly, you've treated the account as your personal resource, taking more than you gave, often forgetting that shared responsibility means shared sacrifice. The final test came with a crisis. Rachel's medical emergency revealed the truth of who you both are. Emma, you chose your wedding over your sister's life. Rachel, you chose to protect your sister even after her betrayal. Therefore, the distribution of my estate will be as follows. Emma grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in painfully. Rachel, we can work this out. Whatever he's left, we can split it. Emma Morrison. Mr. Martinez continued reading. In light of your actions, your share of the inheritance will be placed in a restricted trust. You will receive a monthly allowance of $1,000, with additional funds released only for verified medical emergencies or educational expenses. The color drained from Emma's face. What? No, that's not fair. Rachel Morrison, in recognition of your consistent character and family loyalty, you will receive direct control of your share. $1 million, plus additional medical cost coverage as needed. Furthermore, as the demonstrated responsible party, he will be appointed trustee of Emma's restricted trust. The ballroom erupted in whispers. Emma's perfectly curled hair was coming undone as she shook her head in denial. This can't be happening, she whispered. Not today, not at my wedding. There's more, Mr. Martinez said, still reading. Emma, your recent actions regarding the joint account, specifically the unauthorized withdrawal of funds designated for your sister's cancer treatment, constitute a breach of trust that triggers an additional clause. You have 30 days to repay the full amount to Rachel, or your monthly trust allowance will be suspended until repayment is complete. Emma's new husband Richard stepped forward, his face dark with anger. Cancer treatment? Emma, what is he talking about? I almost felt sorry for her as she stood there, her perfect wedding day crumbling around her. Almost. One final note, Mr. Martinez concluded. My dear granddaughters, money doesn't create character, it reveals it. What you do with this inheritance will write the next chapter of your story. Choose wisely. Love, Grandpa Frank. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma's mascara was running as she turned to me, her voice breaking. Rachel, please, you can't let this happen. We're sisters. Yes, we are. I agree quietly. And sisters don't steal each other's cancer treatment money for flower arrangements. I turned to Mr. Martinez. I'd like to set up the surgery payment right away. And once that's done, we should discuss investment options for the rest. Of course, he smiled. Your grandfather always said you had his head for planning. As we walked away, I heard Richard demanding explanations from Emma, their wedding guests pretending not to stare. The perfect day she'd sacrificed everything for, including my health and our relationship, was thoroughly publicly ruined. That was 3 months ago. The surgery was successful, and I'm now halfway through radiation therapy. The prognosis is good, though the relationship with my sister may be terminal. Emma tried everything: tears, guilt trips, legal threats, to change the trust arrangement. But Grandpa Frank's documents were ironclad. She and Richard are in counseling now, their newlywed bliss tainted by the revelations of her character. I've kept my job at the hospital, though I did upgrade to a more comfortable apartment. The inheritance sits mostly untouched, invested as Grandpa Frank would have wanted. Every month, I authorize Emma's allowance transfer, a reminder of how money can reveal the truth about people. Yesterday, while going through old photos, I found one of Grandpa Frank at my nursing school graduation. He's beaming at the camera, his pockets undoubtedly full of candy, looking like any other proud grandfather. But now I see the wisdom in his eyes, the careful way he watched us grow. He knew, somehow, that we'd face this test. He knew money could poison even the closest relationships, so he set up a safety net, not just of money, but of justice. Maria visited me in the hospital after my surgery, bringing a card from the pediatric ward staff. You know what this means? She asked, gesturing at the pile of get well flowers. Now you can finally focus on healing yourself instead of taking care of everyone else. She's right, but not entirely. I'm still taking care of others, my patients, my friends, even Emma in a way. But now I do it from a place of strength and wisdom, understanding that true family isn't about shared blood or bank accounts. It's about choices, character, and sometimes having the courage to let go. Last week, I received a wedding invitation from Maria's daughter. Inside was a note: "No gifts, please. Your presence is all we want." I smiled, thinking of how different it was from Emma's elaborate demands. I'll go to that wedding, bringing nothing but love and good wishes, and maybe some candy in my pockets, just like Grandpa Frank would have done. After all, his final lesson wasn't really about money. It was about understanding that our choices define us, that character matters more than appearances, and that sometimes the greatest inheritance we can receive is the wisdom to know the difference. Emma still doesn't understand that. Maybe she never will. But as I sit in my new apartment, reviewing investment portfolios and trust disbursements, I can almost hear Grandpa Frank's voice. Money doesn't make you rich, sweetheart. It's what you do with it that counts. I think he'd be proud of how his test turned out. Not because of who got the money, but because it revealed the truth about Emma, about me, about what really matters in the end. And that's worth